evening, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Political Forum. I'm Mike Jacobson, where we're going to break down Chicago's mayoral election and other elections from yesterday's election. And with us is Dick Simpson, UIC political science professor. Thank you for being on the show today.
Glad to be here.
All right, folks, now this is your chance, too. If you have a question, comment, or concern, anything about yesterday's election, the numbers at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060. And you can tell your friends. You can watch us also online at cantv.org/hotline. That's cantv.org/hotline. And also, we are streaming this live on Facebook. Just go to Can TV Chicago. That is at Can TV Chicago, and you will see us there as well. Okay, so let's get this started, Dick. So, an historic mayoral election.
Yes, very much.
With historic results. So, what what is your take? You know, obviously you're also a former alderman of Florida 4th. What is your take? What have you heard?
I think this is an important election. Obviously, it's important that we've elected a black woman, lesbian mayor. We haven't been able to have even an African-American mayor since Harold Washington and Eugene Sawyer. So from a diversity perspective, and as Lori put it in her statement last night, every child in Chicago can now think to themselves, well, I could be mayor of the city or president, as one of the speakers last night said at Lori's rally, be president of the United States. So that's an important thing. But beyond that, this is a watershed moment. We're obviously facing big challenges in Chicago. But one of the questions is, are we going to be the same old machine-run city that we've been for 150 years, or are we going to take a new course? We started that under the Harold Washington progressive regime back in the 1980s, but then we got sidetracked. There were things that happened that were positive under Mayor Daley and under Mayor Emanuel, but the old machine got refurbished and became the new machine. This is going to be the anti-machine, or the reform, what President Obama called hope and change. Hope and change has come to Chicago.
Yeah, so because where did Lightfoot's support come from? I mean, 3 out of 4 voters basically voted for her. After, back in February, she wasn't even expected to be in the top 3. Well,
she had a positive message. If you were watching her website and her speeches, you saw that her platform was very detailed. There was on her website a platform of the top 3 proposals of each item, like police reform and crime. But then there was a long position paper with 10 points. It was thoroughly researched. It was one of the best sets of platforms, and I've been watching political campaigns for 50 years now. So she had a real platform. It wasn't just, I'm for change, but I don't know what I mean by it. Secondly, she ran a positive campaign, and Chicago is ready for a positive vision of the future. And third, because of the scandals that came with corruption, the Burke scandal, followed by the Solis scandal, followed by the Cochran scandal, the voters were convinced, hey, things are really bad enough, we do need to have a change. And that fed into her theme. Preckwinkle tried to sell that, well, you have to have experience to run a city. Well, it's partly true. Experience is a good thing. For instance, President Trump does not have experience, and I view him as a bad president because of that. But Lori's ideas about change just trumped any sense that Preckwinkle had of some past experience is a good thing. It didn't sell to the voters. They weren't buying.
Speaking to the point you just mentioned, talking about corruption, some people point to November 29th, 2018 as the turning point. That was the day where the feds raided Alderman Burke's office. Like, is that basically, do you agree that that was the turning point?
That was one, and then of course they put in the criminal charges in January, and that was followed by the information about Solis wearing the wire, and that was followed even last week by Cochran's guilty plea. So you had all of that continuing to promote Lori's theme, it's time for a change. We've got to move on, or she put it, let the light in.
So now these are 2 very similar questions that might have different results. So now that Lori is in, what do you think is the first thing that she should do versus what do you think, that she will do?
So let's talk about what you have to do, to put it a little differently. So the first thing she has to do is to get a majority in the city council. And that happens 2 days after they're sworn in, or 3, they have a city council meeting. The council no longer exists, it's starting anew. And the first thing that is voted on in the council, the very first votes, are the committees, the committee chairman, and the rules of procedure. And that vote sets the tone for the next 4 years. So by that time, Lori needs to have a majority of the city council. She needs to have a floor leader of the city council who's going to be head of the finance committee that she trusts and is going to carry out her agenda. You could see that, for instance, to go back to council wars. Those votes went 29 to 21 the wrong way. That held until court decisions caused new elections 3.5 years later. Harold did not have control of the council, a majority, until after that. Now, you can still govern if you don't have that, but you can't be as effective. And we would like to see for Lori Lightfoot what are called the first 100 days, 100 days of massive change implemented permanently. That would be the ideal. Can't get the ideal, then you go on and govern anyway. Secondly, she has to make clear to Chicago that she is getting some of her agenda done, and that's probably by executive order. There are a number of executive orders that are signed on the first day. If there is an agenda, under Harold it was freedom of information, and then signing to agree to the patronage case, the Shackman case. So there'll be a series of very quick actions, and we will know within a week of her taking office whether it's going to be a smooth or a rocky road. If it's a smooth road, you're going to see a lot of change rolled out very quickly. She will have a very effective transition team. There's already a transition team staff. And today she met with the mayor, and at that meeting was given 250 pages of documentation about what's going on in the city and what should happen. That has to be digested. She has to make 742 appointments that are key positions in City Hall. They're called Shackman exempt positions. All of that happens between now and May 20th.
Wow. And so it's trying to get to that 26 number, right? Trying to
That's
get that
the
following.
first key. Yeah, obviously you'd like to have 40 to 10,
Right.
As Emmanuel did, but you may not get there, but as long as you've got the 26 and you can hold the veto, you can govern pretty effectively.
So you've been around, this political scene for 40, 50 years. So what behind the scenes? You just got a little bit of it right now, but what are we seeing? Well, what is Lightfoot seeing, and what are aldermen seeing right now?
Well, the aldermen are already trying to organize to make sure they get the committee chairmanship. All of the progressive aldermen did not have the chairmanships of the committee, so there are a number of aldermen who are returning to City Hall who think it's their turn now at least to have some committee chairmanship. You've got other aldermen who are currently holding the committee chairmanship. Now we've lost the key ones. Burke will not be finance head. Pat O'Connor will not be there. Solis will not be there. So there are a number of openings, but they're not as many as want to have the position. So there is a scramble, and it's already happening among the aldermen. They're having conversations among themselves. Hey, I'll trade you this committee if you give me that committee.
Yeah.
It's not so much committee membership, although that seems important. Every returning alderman will be on the finance committee, and that's where 80% of the key legislation is done.
So it's talk about then really it's the new guard versus the old guard when you're looking at city council and the alderman.
And it's every alderman for himself or herself. Yeah. And how can I get 25 friends to think I'm the best thing since sliced bread and put me as head of the finance committee?
Right. And so in your regard, like when you're talking about finance, like zoning and budget, are those basically the top 3 committees?
Yes, but every committee comes with at least 3 staff members. Yeah. So if you're an alderman, you only got 2 or 3 or 4 staff people in your office. How would you like to have an extra 3 salaries to give out? It's a good perk, and it's very helpful in re-election time, and you can have them do a lot more than shuffle paper.
So now back to the scene where it seems like it's transitioning into difference. I think voters were saying that they didn't want the old guard, that they didn't want the Chicago machine. When you're looking at that, they didn't vote for Preckwinkle, and also that O'Connor a lost out, and that there's other aldermen who've been there for a while who are like in tight races. There's some where the votes are like less than 50 or 50 votes that are between them and their challenger. What does this mean?
Well, first of all, the Lori Lightfoot win is what helped propel so many new aldermen into their position and to defeat the incumbents. That translated like the O'Connor election. I think it's fair to say that the 40th Ward new alderman would not be the alderman if it hadn't been for the Lori Lightfoot voters in that ward who also voted for him. But that's true across many of the wards. So on the one hand, and there are other wards, I live in the 43rd Ward, Michelle Smith won her re-election because she tied her coattails to Lori Lightfoot as well as her own record. And that meant that she picked up some of the Lori Lightfoot voters. Otherwise, she would have lost the election. She won, but she's got to be a Lightfoot supporter because she owes her election in part to Lori Lightfoot. So it's a complicated interplay, and it's one very important from both sides. From the new mayor's side, she needs 26 votes solid in the council or more. And in terms of the alderman, you'd like to be friends of the mayor because there are a lot of things the mayor can get for you. Suppose you want to get an ordinance passed. The mayor can facilitate that. They can introduce it as the mayor's ordinance, or they can see that your ordinance and your name passes. They can give appointments to friends of yours in the city government. They can make sure that certain services get done. And for bigger projects that require the park district or the school board, who appoints those boards? The mayor.
So, and then talk also about the new aldermen, those who've never even been on city council, like Andrea Vasquez in the 40th Ward, for instance. What are they doing right now?
Well, assuming they won the election straight out, there's some that are still scrambling. Then they are trying to figure out, hey, I just won, what do I do now? They've got to set up an office. They've got to hire 3 or 4 staff members. And they might come from the campaign, but they got to come from somewhere. And they're trying to figure out where's the bathroom in City Hall. I mean, this is a big job, and it's very hard because the first vote they cast is the most important vote in their career and in the 4 years. So how do they figure? I mean, they've got various people applying them saying, hey, vote for me and we'll put together this and you can get that committee. Even wonderful aldermen, the best alderman in the history of Chicago, Lynn Dupre, when he first became alderman in 1955, didn't have it figured out on that first vote. Now, I think aldermen now know much more about that first vote than they did back then, but that key vote is crucial. And they got to figure out where they stand. Are they going to be a Lightfoot supporter and work with Lightfoot to bring change to Chicago, or are they going to stand in the way? If they stand in the way, they may get steamrolled.
And is that part of this transition? Like, this is the other thing too. You mentioned before, like, that Lori Lightfoot, the mayor-elect, met with Rahm Emanuel today. They discussed, something Rahm tweeted it out today too. Is this part of that transition where she's going over through all the stuff that he believes she should do, and then obviously she's got her people in her staff are saying, no, we've got to also do this.
So what's happening with the early stages of the Lightfoot transition is, unlike some of them, they are making extensive contacts. For instance, let's take the arts and culture, since we're here at a TV studio that covers that kind of stuff. They're making calls to the 50 most important art organizations, community groups, artists in Chicago to figure out what is it we really need to jumpstart art and culture in Chicago. And that's true for 45 different agencies and units of government that are directly respond to the mayor of the city of Chicago. That's a huge task in really 45 days.
Because Lori Lightfoot has never held office, never been elected. Is this a hurdle for her?
Well, she hadn't done this before, but she did have a very effective campaign staff, and it did grow to some depth. That by the end there was not only a press person, but assistant press person, and not only a campaign manager, but an assistant campaign manager and a chief of staff and so forth. So I was impressed with how well they melded both the old practices of campaigns with new ideas, coming from her experience as a lawyer and her experience in city government at the agency level.
And then so one of the things that focused on her campaign was investing, she said, in all of Chicago and
Yes.
not just downtown. Ron was known, like he did bring in, big business downtown, but the outskirts were ignored.
Yeah, if we're to succeed as a city, we have to succeed at the neighborhood level. And we're not going to bring back most of the old factories that we used to have in the old days. We're not bringing back gigantic steelworks throughout Chicago. So that's a tricky program, but yes, just like Harold Washington had his neighborhood economic development plan, what Lori is saying is, well, yes, we need to keep bringing jobs and money and big developments downtown, tourism, conventions, but we have to do the neighborhoods. And Rahm Emanuel didn't do the neighborhoods very well.
And actually, today there's news, English going around stating that, that tech companies and big businesses they don't know what to expect because because of what Lori would do for them. Obviously, because Rahm was focused on tech, focused on bringing in the Googles, into Chicago. But Lori really hasn't. She's saying no. She really wants to focus on the neighborhoods.
Yeah, she gave some reassurances to business during the campaign. She said she would not do a transaction tax on the exchanges, which is a way to raise a lot of money, but the threat was the exchanges would move out of town and that would be disastrous to Chicago. So the business community is going to have to get comfortable with Lori. There's no reason they shouldn't. She has worked with businesses. One of Tony Preckwinkle's hits on Lori is she was a lawyer at a major firm for the billion-dollar businesses of the world who had problems. So Lori's worked with business people for a long time, but they do have to figure it out. It's not, if they're going to do it, if they're going to develop big developments, they better have some affordable housing in the plan. If they're going to do economic development in Chicago, they're going to bring business here, they better have some jobs in that package. Because that's what Chicago needs. They need jobs, they need affordable housing, they need business, they need for small business to succeed, not just big business. She's going to be a very active mayor for small business, trying to cut down, she said last night in her victory speech, she's going to cut down the barriers. There's no reason you have to wait 2 years to get a permit to start a small business in Chicago.
Right, and then also talk about the LGBTQ community. Because Lori had a platform. She had a plan in terms of how to help out. With education. And services provided specifically. This is now putting the focus and a spotlight on this community, which they say in the past there hasn't been enough done for it.
Well, and she owes her election to that community in part because they helped raise money and helped raise votes early. That's what, remember, she only got 17.5% in the primary. Now, that was most of the votes. Yeah. But Preckwinkle got 16%, but there were a number of other candidates that followed with 15, 14, 13. If the gay community had not early backed Lori, both with money and with support, it would have been a difficult election that first through the primary. In the general, their votes were helpful, but they weren't as critical in the runoff election as they were in the primary. In the primary, they were very important.
So now let's not talk about Tony, Tony Preckwinkle. What happens now? They're obviously 75% to 25%. That's a big time loss. Where does she go from here?
Well, she's president of the Cook County Board. She has a 4-year term. She just got elected in November. And she's made major good changes in the county, both with the healthcare system and the criminal justice system. I expect to see those kind of changes continue. And just today, she and Lori Lightfoot met with Jesse Jackson and others and swore that they would work together to make a better city and a better county. I don't see a problem for Tony. I'm sure she has hurt feelings. I've lost elections as well as won them. You're not happy about losing. But in Tony's case, she has a wonderful fallback and a wonderful opportunity for a great legacy and a history as county board chairman.
Looks like we have a caller on the line. Caller, are you there? Do you have a question or comment?
I am. I actually had a question for the guest about last night's treasurer's outcome.
Yes.
So I was watching, and I didn't realize that the new treasurer is married to an alderman.
Yes.
Is that a conflict, or how does that work?
No, she's her own person. She's a state legislator currently, and she'll be treasurer of the city of Chicago. Now, you might ask if there was clout involved in the sense that her husband is part of the west side of Chicago political operation, and that's true. But no, she is her own person, and she will rule as treasurer no matter what her husband does as alderman.
Oh, okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Cole. Yeah, I think that some voters brought that up because they looked to Madigan, and how his daughter was the Attorney General, and so they're wondering, could something similar happen in Chicago?
Well, but look, as Attorney General, Lisa Madigan was an excellent Attorney General. Now, she didn't get to run for governor because of Madigan still being in the way, Mike Madigan still being head of the General Assembly, but and that might be a problem for the new treasurer if she wanted to run for higher office, but it is not a problem for her being treasurer. She had less grandiose schemes than Alderman Pawar, who ran. He was going to create a city bank and do other things that were going to be a major use of the treasurer's office. But I think she can at least move in and perform the basic functions of the treasurer's office, and she will probably be sensitive to investing some of the city's money into the banks and the financial institutions on the south and west side of Chicago. And the current treasurer has made some steps to use the treasurer's office for more than just bookkeeping.
So let's get back to the election too, also about the turnout. About 1 in 3, about 33% of Chicago's people who were registered actually voted. That's about the same number as in the February election.
Well, and it's the same number basically as the last election in 2015 when Rahm Emanuel and Chuy Garcia were running against each other in the runoff. It's not a good number. There's nothing to be proud of just only a third of the registered voters voted. But it is better than some other cities, and we need to improve that. There was I thought, a pretty clear choice. Some voters may have said, well, they're both sort of progressive, I don't think I care. You could have had some racism. Some people say, well, I've got to choose a black mayor. I don't want a black mayor because I'm racist. That could have come into effect, but I don't think so. I think it was basically, we don't take advantage of the opportunity we have for democracy. And we are in danger as a nation of losing our democracy. I'm writing a whole new book just about the challenges to democracy, and they don't have to do just with, whether you like President Trump or not. We have fundamental problems with our democracy that we have to cure. And certainly, the level of voting isn't very hopeful.
And speaking of challenges, Lightfoot, so one of the challenges she's going to face is that the critics for her camp said, they had issues with her policies on police and criminal justice. So moving forward, how should she handle this?
Well, it's very clear. She was head of the task force that put together the proposal, what was wrong with the police department, that made the consent decree. She's going to implement the consent decree. It is a matter before the courts. The courts are going to enforce it. The city has agreed to it, and that's our way forward. And that's important because there's some issues like police contract, which are complicated, but they're central to how we report crime, how we report police shootings, and a whole bunch of other issues. Implementing the plan that's behind the consent decree is very solid, and that's our first step forward. The next thing is to improve the police community relations, and hopefully with a new mayor and a new city council, voters will be encouraged to think that they should have control of the police department and they have a voice.
We have about a minute left, so quick answers here. Eddie Johnson, what do you think is going to happen with him?
Well, Lori has said that she's not going to fire him the first day, that he's going to stay a while. Not clear how long. He said he wants at least another 2 years. He wants stability in the department, and they're making progress. So she will meet with him and make a decision. In fact, she met with him and the mayor today. I think that he will be in position for a while, and if he can come up with good programs to improve policing, She and he know each other. She was head of the police board. I think there won't be an immediate firing, and he will proceed for a while as police superintendent.
Then lastly, what should voters expect between now and May 20th when there's a swearing in and we get our first city council a little bit after that? What should voters expect?
Well, there'll be a transition team working behind the scenes. They won't be issuing press conferences every day with what the new policies will be. The mayor will start enacting them on May 20th. So if there's a good transition, the key will be key appointments, people like the corporation council, the deputy mayors, chief of staff, the head of the city council, whoever that's going to be, getting that block of 26 or more aldermen together, deciding which executive orders to issue. Those are a lot of the challenges, but there's 742 appointments you have to make. They don't have to all happen the first day, but the key departments, you want your people in there and you want them with enough time to get themselves ready for major change.
Wow, a lot of stuff happening between now and then.
Yeah, it's a busy time. It's not a downtime.
Well, Dick, thank you so much
Glad
for
to be
joining
here.
us tonight. A lot of great answers. I hope you guys are all informed. No, I am. So that's been Political Forum. We are a service brought to you by CAN-TV. Please tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. as we have great guests on. And until then, everyone, please have a good night.